Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most controversial and high-profile criminal cases in American history. A case that not only captured the attention of the nation, but the entire world. The infamous O.J. Simpson murder trial. This case is so much more than just a criminal trial. It's a media frenzy, a story about race, fame, power, and the complexities of the American legal system. What happened to O.J. Simpson? Was he guilty? Or was he the victim of a massive conspiracy? The trial, which lasted for over a year, captivated millions of people around the globe, and despite the verdict, many questions still remain. So today, let's go back to the very beginning and explore what led to one of the most gripping and controversial court cases in modern history. Let's rewind the clock to June 12, 1994, a date that would go down in history, a night that changed everything for O.J. Simpson, his ex-wife Nicole Brown, and a young man named Ron Goldman. Part 1. A night that changed everything. It was a Sunday evening in Los Angeles, and the summer heat still lingered in the air. The time was 10:15 p.m. when a series of unsettling sounds pierced the stillness of a quiet, upscale neighborhood on Rockingham Avenue in Brentwood. The sound came from a dog, a frantic, almost desperate barking echoing through the streets. But this wasn't just any regular dog bark. This one was different. It was a bark full of panic, almost as if the dog knew something terrible was happening. Pablo Fennett, a screenwriter and playwright, was sitting in his living room working on a script. When he heard the noise, initially, he thought it would stop soon, that it was just some disturbance in the neighborhood that would eventually die down. But it didn't. The barking continued, growing louder and more desperate. Frustrated by the disturbance, Pablo decided to take a walk outside to see what was going on. He made his way toward the source of the barking, which seemed to come from a house just a few doors down. When he reached the house, the atmosphere was heavy, the air felt thick, as if something bad had happened. And then he saw it. It was a sight he would never forget. On the ground in front of the house lay the bodies, sprawled out and lifeless. Blood stained the concrete beneath them, and a pool of crimson surrounded their bodies. It was an absolutely horrifying scene. The bodies of two people, both young and full of life, now reduced to mere casualties of an act of brutal violence. One of them, a woman, was Nicole Brown Simpson, the ex-wife of the former NFL superstar O.J. Simpson. The other, a young man, was Ron Goldman, a 25-year-old restaurant waiter and a friend of Nicole. The sight was enough to leave Pablo shaken. He immediately dialed 911, reporting what he had just witnessed. There's a dead woman and a dead man, and it's all covered in blood. They're lying in front of the house. There's blood everywhere. As soon as the police arrived on the scene, the chaos began. The officers quickly confirmed that the victims were indeed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The investigation began, but there was no immediate lead on the killer. The two victims had been brutally attacked, both stabbed multiple times with a sharp weapon. Their bodies showed signs of a violent struggle, and the crime scene was gruesome. Who could have done this? That was the question on everyone's mind. The most chilling part of the discovery was the realization that Nicole Brown was not just any victim. She had been married to O.J. Simpson, one of the most famous and beloved athletes in America at the time. Simpson had retired from professional football years earlier, but his fame had never waned. He had transitioned into acting and was a commercial icon, known for his charming personality and squeaky clean image. The idea that someone so famous could be involved in a murder seemed impossible. But the more investigators delved into the case, the more a dark and twisted connection between O.J. Simpson and the crime began to emerge. The discovery of the key suspect as the investigation into the murders unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the suspect could be someone close to Nicole Brown. The police quickly determined that she had been divorced from O.J. Simpson for some time, but they still maintained an ongoing relationship for the sake of their two children. Despite the divorce, there had been numerous reports of tension between the two, with friends and family describing the relationship as volatile and marked by domestic violence. In fact, Nicole Brown had called the police on multiple occasions during their marriage, reporting incidents of abuse. O.J. Simpson, it seemed, had a history of violent outbursts, and his jealousy and possessiveness were often cited as causes of the turmoil in their relationship. But it wasn't just domestic violence that seemed to link Simpson to the crime. The police soon discovered that the two victims, Nicole and Ron, had been together the night of the murders. Ron Goldman had been at the restaurant where Nicole and her family were dining, and after the meal, he had offered to drop off a pair of eyeglasses that Nicole's mother had left behind at the restaurant. It was an innocent gesture, one that would lead to his tragic and untimely death. The idea that Ron Goldman was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time only added to the tragedy of the story. He wasn't Nicole's lover. He wasn't her boyfriend. He was just a friend doing a good deed. But tragically, his kind gesture would cost him his life. It wasn't long before O.J. Simpson, the ex-husband of the victim, became the prime suspect in the case. His close proximity to the crime scene, his violent history, and the mounting evidence against him made him the obvious suspect. But there was one major issue. Simpson was nowhere to be found. On the night of the murders, O.J. Simpson had been in a completely different part of the city. At least that was his story. But when the police began their search, they couldn't find Simpson at his home. His whereabouts were unknown, and his behavior began to raise suspicions. The more the investigators dug into Simpson's life, the more they realized that this wasn't just a simple case of domestic violence gone wrong. There were deeper issues at play, and Simpson's life was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The search for O.J. Simpson as the police launched a search for Simpson. The media quickly seized on the case, bringing it to the forefront of public consciousness. The news outlets, both local and national, began speculating on Simpson's involvement, broadcasting the case on every channel. Simpson had been one of the most famous athletes in America, and now he was the subject of an international manhunt. The media circus surrounding the case grew to an unprecedented scale, with millions of viewers tuning in to watch the latest updates. The search for Simpson led to a dramatic turn of events. Simpson was not only wanted by the police, but he was also reportedly on the run. The scene that would go down in history occurred when Simpson, in a white Ford Bronco, led the police on a slow speed chase across Los Angeles. It was a bizarre moment. A man who had once been a beloved sports icon, now at the center of a criminal investigation, being chased by the police in full view of the public. The chase was broadcast live, and for the next several hours, the world watched as Simpson's every move was followed by helicopters and news crews. This chase marked a turning point in the case, making it one of the most televised events in history. The entire nation was glued to their screens, unsure of what would happen next. And when Simpson eventually returned home, he was arrested and charged with the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. Conclusion of Part 1. The case had now moved from the streets of Los Angeles to the courtroom, where the future of O.J. Simpson would be determined. But what followed would change the way America viewed justice, race, and fame forever. The trial that followed became the trial of the century, capturing the attention of millions and sparking debates on everything from racial inequality to the flaws in the American legal system. As the story unfolds, we will see how Simpson's fate would hinge not just on the evidence against him, but on a battle of legal minds, a media frenzy, and a country divided over issues of race and celebrity. The trial of O.J. Simpson would become a symbol of America's struggles with justice, fame, and power. Stay tuned as we continue to explore this gripping saga in the next part of our series. This script sets the stage for a deep dive into the infamous O.J. Simpson case, capturing both the intensity of the investigation and the high-profile nature of the trial. Would you like me to continue or provide additional details on specific areas of the case? Let me know if you'd like further assistance with the next part. Part 2, the trial of the century. The prosecution's case after O.J. Simpson's dramatic slow-speed chase and subsequent arrest. The stage was set for what would become a historic courtroom battle. The case quickly morphed into a media circus, with the entire world tuning in as the prosecution and defense squared off. In one of the most high-profile trials in American legal history, it wasn't just a trial, it was a cultural event, one that gripped the public's imagination and ignited heated debates about race, celebrity, and justice. This was the trial of the century. The prosecution's strategized prosecution team was led by Marcia Clark, an experienced and highly skilled attorney who had been with the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office for many years. She was determined to bring Simpson to justice. From the outset, the prosecution's case was built on the belief that Simpson had the motive, the means, and the opportunity to commit the crime. The prosecution began by focusing on the undeniable connection between Simpson and the victims. Nicole Simpson, his ex-wife, had been killed in a brutal attack outside her home, and Ron Goldman, a young waiter who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, was also slaughtered. Evidence found at the crime scene, including the footprints and the blood, seemed to point to Simpson as the prime suspect. In fact, it didn't take long for the prosecution to build a case that seemed airtight. Investigators had discovered blood stains on Simpson's car, a bloody glove at his home, and other incriminating evidence that appeared to suggest Simpson's involvement in the murders. The blood on Simpson's car, in particular, was a major piece of evidence, as it matched the DNA of both Nicole and Ron Goldman. But the most damning piece of evidence for the prosecution was the discovery of a black leather glove at the crime scene. A matching glove was found at Simpson's home. The glove had traces of blood from both victims, and the prosecution argued that this was the key piece of evidence that connected Simpson directly to the crime. The prosecution also emphasized Simpson's violent history. They highlighted the multiple calls to the police from Nicole reporting incidents of domestic abuse, Simpson's violent tendencies were well known to his family and friends, and there was a clear history of physical abuse in his marriage to Nicole. The prosecution made it clear that Simpson's abusive behavior, combined with his jealous and controlling nature, provided a strong motive for the killings. But perhaps the most shocking revelation in the trial came when the prosecution presented a timeline of events leading up to the murders. They demonstrated that Simpson had the opportunity to commit the crime, as he had been in the area at the time of the murders. He was seen leaving his house just before the murders occurred and was not accounted for during the time of the killings. The prosecution's timeline suggested that Simpson could have easily driven to Nicole's house, carried out the murders, and then returned to his home without anyone noticing. At the heart of the prosecution's case was the idea that Simpson was guilty and that the evidence was overwhelming. However, as the trial continued, it became clear that the defense was going to present a far different argument. The defense team, the Dream Team O.J. Simpson's defense team, quickly became one of the most high-profile legal teams in history, comprised of some of the most experienced and well-respected attorneys in the country. The defense team was often referred to as the Dream Team. The defense strategy was clear from the start: to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury and to cast doubt on the integrity of the police investigation. The defense was led by Johnny Cochran, a renowned lawyer who was well known for his charisma and his ability to sway juries with his persuasive arguments. Alongside him were Robert Shapiro, a seasoned defense attorney, F. Lee Bailey, a famed criminal defense lawyer, and Alan Dershowitz, a legal scholar and expert on constitutional law. Together, they formed a formidable team that was determined to win the case for Simpson. Cochran, in particular, was a master of courtroom theatrics, and his strategy was to use the racial tensions in America as a backdrop for the trial. He argued that Simpson was being targeted by the Los Angeles Police Department LAPD because of his race. Cochran presented a narrative that suggested Simpson was the victim of a conspiracy, a scapegoat who was being framed by corrupt and racist police officers. One of the main arguments presented by the defense was the idea that the evidence against Simpson had been mishandled and tampered with by the LAPD. They pointed to the discovery of the bloody glove at Simpson's home and suggested that it had been planted by the police. In an attempt to frame him, the defense also questioned the credibility of the LAPD's lead detective, Mark Foreman, a man whose racist views were exposed during the trial. Foreman had made racist remarks in the past, and the defense seized on this fact, arguing that it was proof that the LAPD had targeted Simpson because of his race. The iconic moments: "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." One of the most iconic moments in the entire trial came when the defense team presented Simpson with the infamous pair of bloody gloves. The prosecution had previously presented the glove found at the crime scene and the matching glove found at Simpson's home. During the trial, the defense team asked Simpson to try on the glove in front of the jury. As Simpson struggled to fit the glove onto his hand, Cochran made his now famous statement: "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." The defense argued that the glove was too small for Simpson's hand, suggesting that it couldn't possibly have been his. This moment became one of the most widely discussed and debated in legal history. It raised questions about the validity of the prosecution's evidence and suggested that perhaps Simpson wasn't the killer after all. This dramatic moment, coupled with the revelations about the LAPD's handling of the case, led many to question whether Simpson was being framed. The defense created a compelling narrative, one that turned the trial into a high-stakes battle over issues of race, justice, and corruption. The racial divide, a nation divided. As the trial continued, it became clear that the case was not just about a double murder. It had become a symbol of the racial tensions that were brewing in America. The media coverage of the trial was intense, and it quickly became apparent that the country was divided along racial lines. Many African Americans, particularly in Simpson's home city of Los Angeles, believed that Simpson was being unfairly targeted by the police and the legal system because of his race. They saw the case as an example of the systemic racism that existed within the LAPD and the justice system as a whole. For many Black Americans, Simpson became a symbol of resistance against a corrupt and racist legal system. On the other hand, many white Americans saw Simpson as guilty. They believed the evidence against him was irrefutable and were appalled by the defense's tactics. The public reaction to the trial reflected a deep-seated divide in American society, with race playing a central role in the way the case was viewed. The trial also sparked a national conversation about domestic violence. Nicole Brown Simpson had been a victim of abuse during her marriage to Simpson, and many people began to question why someone like Simpson, a well-known public figure, had been allowed to continue his violent behavior without facing the consequences. The case highlighted the issues surrounding domestic violence and the need for a more effective response from law enforcement and society at large. The verdict, a shocking conclusion after months of intense courtroom drama. The case finally went to the jury for deliberation. The jurors were asked to consider the evidence and decide whether O.J. Simpson was guilty or not guilty of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The jury deliberated for several hours, and the nation waited with bated breath to hear the verdict. On October 3, 1995, after more than a year of testimony, O.J. Simpson was acquitted of all charges. The verdict was read in court, and the room erupted in cheers from Simpson supporters, while his critics were left in shock and disbelief. The jury's decision was met with mixed emotions across the country. For many, Simpson's acquittal was seen as a victory, particularly for African Americans who believed that Simpson had been wrongfully accused. For others, it was a devastating blow, as they believed that justice had not been served and that Simpson had gotten away with murder. The trial was over, but its effects would reverberate for years to come. Simpson had been acquitted, but questions about his guilt would continue to linger. The case had exposed deep divisions in American society, and its aftermath would have lasting consequences for both Simpson and the country. Conclusion of Part 2. The O.J. Simpson trial may have ended in acquittal, but the questions it raised about race, justice, and the power of celebrity were far from over. Simpson would go on to face civil charges, and the media would continue to follow his every move. The trial left a permanent mark on American culture, and its legacy would be felt for generations. Stay tuned for the next part of this series, where we'll explore what happened after the trial and how Simpson's life spiraled into further controversy. Next steps, would you like me to continue with the next part or explore specific aspects of the case in more detail? Let me know how I can assist you further. Part 3. The Aftermath. Life after the trial. Jury's decision to acquit O.J. Simpson of the brutal murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman sent shockwaves throughout the country. The trial, dubbed the trial of the century, not only captured the attention of millions, but also deeply divided public opinion along racial, political, and social lines. As the dust settled from the dramatic court proceedings, Simpson's life, once a beacon of athletic prowess and Hollywood fame, was left in tatters. But the legal battles were far from over. The civil suit, just as outside the courtroom, Simpson had been acquitted in the criminal trial. The families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were determined to seek justice for their loved ones. The civil courts were the next battleground for Simpson, as the families of the victims filed a wrongful death lawsuit against him. Civil trials are different from criminal trials in that the burden of proof is lower, rather than being proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The plaintiffs only needed to show that it was more likely than not that Simpson had killed their loved ones. The civil trial began in 1996, and it was a stark contrast to the criminal trial. The defense team was much smaller, and O.J. Simpson did not have the luxury of the high-profile dream team of lawyers that had helped him avoid conviction in the criminal case. The court proceedings were also more focused on the damages owed to the families, rather than on establishing criminal guilt. The plaintiffs argued that Simpson had, without a doubt, killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, citing the same evidence that had been presented during the criminal trial, including the bloody gloves, the bloody footprints, and the DNA evidence linking Simpson to the crime. The plaintiffs also called attention to Simpson's history of domestic violence, arguing that it was well documented and part of the pattern of behavior that led to the deaths of both victims. Unlike the criminal trial, where O.J. Simpson's legal team was able to successfully create reasonable doubt, the civil jury deliberated much less time before reaching a verdict. On February 4, 1997, the civil jury found Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The jury awarded the Goldman family $33.5 million in damages, including both compensatory and punitive damages. Simpson was ordered to pay this amount to the victims' families. The civil verdict did not offer the satisfaction of criminal justice, but provided the families with a legal victory. However, the financial reality for Simpson was stark. At the time, Simpson was in significant debt, with an estimated net worth of around $11 million, a fraction of the money he had made during his peak years as a football star and actor. The civil judgment was a blow to his finances, and it would take years for the Goldman family to see any meaningful compensation. Simpson had assets frozen, and his prized possessions were sold off, including his Heisman Trophy, which was auctioned off to help pay the damages. Simpson's life post-acquittal, public perception, and continuing infamy. While Simpson had been acquitted in the criminal trial, his public image had taken a severe hit. He went from being a beloved sports figure, with endorsement deals and a popular television presence, to a man defined by scandal and suspicion. The media attention on him never ceased. Even after the trial concluded. In the years following the trial, Simpson attempted to rebuild his life, but his celebrity status was forever tarnished. He remained a prominent figure in the media, but it was mostly for all the wrong reasons. Simpson made a series of controversial public appearances, and in 2006, He even published a book titled If I Did It, in which he outlined a hypothetical account of the murders, suggesting that if he had committed the crime, it would have happened in a particular way. The book caused a public outcry, and many people felt that Simpson was confessing, or at least admitting guilt. The backlash was swift and intense, and the book's publisher canceled its release. Nevertheless, Simpson's reputation was further damaged. In addition to the book, Simpson's appearance in a controversial interview on Fox, in which he seemed to provide even more unsettling thoughts about the murders, only fueled public perception of his guilt. The media, in turn, seized on these moments, which only deepened the public's animosity toward Simpson. Despite his tarnished reputation, Simpson's financial troubles continued. By 2007, he was living in a modest Las Vegas home and trying to make a living through sporadic public appearances and commercial endeavors. However, Simpson's legal and financial problems were far from over. The Las Vegas incident, a criminal comeback. Simpson's story took another dramatic turn in 2007 when he was involved in a robbery in a Las Vegas hotel room in an attempt to retrieve sports memorabilia that he claimed was rightfully his. Simpson and a group of armed men entered the hotel room of two memorabilia dealers. The dealers had some of Simpson's items, but the manner in which Simpson and his accomplices went about retrieving them led to a criminal case. Simpson was arrested in connection with the incident and charged with armed robbery, kidnapping, and assault with a deadly weapon. His trial was significantly different from his previous one. There was no celebrity defense team, no high-profile lawyers, and no jury divided by racial tensions. Simpson was facing a serious legal situation, and this time, there was no doubt about his guilt. In 2008, O.J. Simpson was convicted of all charges in relation to the Las Vegas robbery. He was sentenced to 33 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 9 years. The conviction was a significant turn of events for Simpson. This time, the criminal justice system seemed to be catching up with him. The fallout, public reaction, and racial tension. Las Vegas conviction revived public interest in Simpson's life, and the media once again turned its attention to the man who had become a symbol of both celebrity and controversy. While some of his supporters still believed he had been wronged in the criminal trial for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, many others viewed his conviction in Las Vegas as poetic justice, a final reckoning for a man who had spent years dodging responsibility for his actions. The racial divide that had marked the earlier trial was not as pronounced in the Las Vegas case, but it still lingered. Some critics argued that Simpson had benefited from his celebrity and wealth during his criminal trial, while others felt that his conviction in the robbery case was a sign of justice finally being served. Public opinion was divided, but the vast majority of people felt that Simpson's past actions had finally caught up with him. Simpson served time at the Lovelock Correctional Center in Nevada, but after 9 years, he was granted parole. On July 20, 2017, O.J. Simpson was released from prison after serving 9 years for the robbery. At the time of his release, Simpson was 70 years old, and his health was in decline. Despite his release, Simpson's reputation remained tainted, and his story continued to provoke debate. Life after prison, a new beginning. After his release, Simpson moved to Florida, where he hoped to start anew. He sought to rebuild his life, but his fame remained largely negative. Simpson took to social media, including Twitter, where he gained a significant following. Though he rarely posted, his posts were carefully curated, and his followers continued to follow his life with fascination. In 2021, Simpson's presence on social media was a stark reminder of the fact that despite being acquitted of the murders in 1995, Simpson's life was always going to be in the public eye. Whether it was for his infamous trial, his post-prison life, or the many controversies that still surrounded him, O.J. Simpson remained a polarizing figure in American society. Simpson's legacy, a case that won't go away. Story of O.J. Simpson is a tragic and complex one, filled with moments of brilliance, success, scandal, and controversy. His legacy is forever tied to the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the ensuing trial, and the years of public scrutiny that followed. Whether he was guilty or innocent remains one of the most debated questions in modern American history. The trial raised questions about race, class, justice, and the power of celebrity, and it is a case that will continue to fascinate historians, legal experts, and the general public for years to come. Simpson's legacy is one of both triumph and tragedy. He was a sports legend, a Hollywood star, and a cultural icon, but he is also a man whose name became synonymous with one of the most infamous criminal trials in history. His life is a reminder of the power of the media, the complexities of the justice system, and the difficult questions that remain unanswered. Conclusion: as we reflect on the events surrounding O.J. Simpson, we are reminded of the flaws in the legal system and the ways in which race and celebrity can shape public perception. Simpson's trial and its aftermath serve as a case study in the intersection of justice, fame, and societal divisions. While some continue to view him as a tragic figure, others see him as a symbol of the failings of the justice system. The story of O.J. Simpson is far from over, and the questions surrounding his involvement in the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman will continue to captivate the public imagination for years to come. No matter how much time passes, Simpson's name will always be tied to the infamous events that unfolded in the 1990s. Part 4. The Dream Team, A Battle in Courtis. The investigation into the brutal murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman reached a critical point. The public's attention began to intensify. O.J. Simpson, the famous former NFL star, now found himself at the center of a media storm. His celebrity status, combined with the mounting evidence pointing towards him, created a perfect storm for a legal showdown of historic proportions. Simpson's defense was about to embark on a journey into one of the most famous and controversial court cases in American history. But Simpson wasn't going to face this battle alone. He hired a team of highly skilled, well-known lawyers, famously dubbed the Dream Team. This group of high-powered attorneys would go on to mount a defense that would not only shock the world, but also spark a series of debates about race, justice, and the American legal system. The team, led by the seasoned and charismatic Robert Shapiro, was a formidable force. Shapiro had built his career as a top criminal defense lawyer and was known for his ability to handle complex cases. Alongside him was the notorious Johnny Cochran, a highly influential attorney and one of the few African-American lawyers who had gained national prominence. Cochran's eloquent speeches and undeniable charisma were going to play a key role in Simpson's defense. The rest of the Dream Team was filled with legal heavyweights: F. Lee Bailey, a famed criminal defense attorney known for his past successes, and Alan Dershowitz, a Harvard law professor who was considered one of the best in his field. Together, this powerhouse of legal minds would go on to mount a strategy that would have people talking for decades. As the trial commenced, the prosecution, led by Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden, faced an uphill battle. They knew that the evidence against Simpson was overwhelming. The DNA evidence, the bloody gloves, the bloodstains, and Simpson's history of domestic violence all pointed directly to him. Yet, they had to face a defense team that was skilled in turning even the most damning evidence into something that could be questioned, manipulated, or outright dismissed. The courtroom was packed with tension, not just from the lawyers, but from the jurors as well. The selection of the jury had already caused waves. Many believed that the selection process had been tainted by racial bias. The jury consisted of 12 members, with a heavy representation of African Americans, leading to speculation about how race might influence the trial's outcome. One of the first major developments in the trial was the use of the infamous bloody glove. The prosecution presented the glove found at the crime scene as a piece of irrefutable evidence. They argued that it belonged to Simpson and that it had traces of both the victim's and his own blood. However, in a move that would go down in history, Cochran, the lead defense attorney, had Simpson try on the glove in front of the jury. The glove appeared to be too tight for Simpson's hands, leading to the now famous line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." This dramatic moment was the turning point in the trial. It was a masterstroke from Cochran, casting doubt on the prosecution's case. Suddenly, the prosecution's seemingly airtight case was in question. The glove, which seemed to be such a significant piece of evidence, had now become an object of ridicule. The defense had planted the seeds of doubt in the jury's mind. But this wasn't the only tactic that the defense team employed. The Dream Team's strategy was far from over. One of their most potent weapons was race. Simpson's legal team, particularly Cochran, made the argument that the Los Angeles Police Department was corrupt and racially biased. They claimed that Mark Foreman, the detective who had discovered the bloody glove at Simpson's estate, was a known racist, and that the evidence was planted to frame Simpson. Cochran's arguments about systemic racism within the police force resonated with the predominantly African-American jury. In a city like Los Angeles, where racial tensions between law enforcement and the black community had been simmering for years, this argument struck a powerful chord. The defense was able to paint Simpson as the victim of a racist conspiracy rather than a guilty man. The courtroom drama escalated as each side presented their case, with both the prosecution and defense bringing in expert witnesses, compelling testimonies, and strategic moves designed to sway the jury. The trial became a spectacle broadcast live on television, with millions of Americans glued to their screens. It wasn't just a murder trial. It had become a media circus, one that was scrutinized by the public, with every detail analyzed and debated. The prosecution had their own set of challenges. They had to counter the defense's racial arguments while also dealing with the mounting uncertainty around the evidence. They had DNA experts testify about the reliability of the blood samples, and forensic specialists worked to prove the chain of custody for the evidence. Despite their best efforts, the Dream Team was successful in highlighting flaws in the prosecution's case. They managed to cast doubt on every piece of evidence, no matter how concrete it seemed. As the trial wore on, it became increasingly clear that this was no longer just about the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The trial had become a battle for justice in the face of a flawed system. The American public became divided along racial lines, with Black Americans rallying behind Simpson and believing he was the victim of a racist conspiracy, while many white Americans believed he was guilty of the heinous crime. Part 5. The verdict and its aftermath. Trial dragged on for more than a year, with every twist and turn scrutinized by the media. Finally, after months of testimony, the case was handed over to the jury. The world watched as the 12 jurors deliberated, knowing that the outcome of this case would reverberate far beyond the courtroom. Would O.J. Simpson be convicted of double murder, or would he walk free? On October 3, 1995, the world got its answer. The jury found O.J. Simpson not guilty of all charges. The moment the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted in chaos. Simpson supporters cheered and celebrated, while others, particularly the families of the victims, sat in stunned silence. Across the country, people reacted with shock and disbelief. How could someone with so much evidence against him walk free? For Simpson, the verdict was a moment of triumph, but it was also the beginning of a long, tumultuous journey. While he was acquitted of murder, he would never escape the shadow of the trial. The media had already turned their attention to his personal life, his behavior, and the aftermath of the trial. Simpson would continue to face legal battles, including a civil trial brought by the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. In 1997, a civil court found Simpson liable for their deaths and ordered him to pay $33.5 million in damages. Despite being acquitted in criminal court, Simpson's financial and personal life would be irreparably damaged by the trial and its aftermath. The trial of O.J. Simpson had left an indelible mark on American society. It raised difficult questions about race, justice, and the role of the media in shaping public opinion. The spectacle of the trial, combined with the intense media coverage, turned the courtroom into a stage for a national drama that played out on television, in newspapers, and in the minds of millions of Americans. The Dream Team's victory was a testament to their skill, strategy, and ability to manipulate the legal system to their advantage, but it also highlighted the deep flaws within that system. The verdict left many feeling that justice had been subverted, and that Simpson's celebrity, wealth, and legal team had ensured his freedom rather than the evidence. Part 6. The legacy of O.J. Simpson. Simpson's life after the trial was a strange mix of triumph and tragedy. Though acquitted in the criminal case, he would face the consequences of his actions in other ways. His wealth dwindled, his personal life fell apart, and he became a symbol of the dangers of fame and the complexities of the American legal system. His story, one of fame, fortune, and infamy, continued to captivate the American public for years to come. But as much as the trial changed Simpson's life, it also transformed the national conversation about race, justice, and the American legal system. The O.J. Simpson trial wasn't just about a double murder. It was a window into the societal and racial tensions that would continue to shape the United States for decades to come. In the end, O.J. Simpson would live out his years as both a cautionary tale and a living legend. His name would forever be tied to one of the most controversial and high-profile court cases in history, leaving the question of his guilt or innocence to linger in the public consciousness for generations. The trial would live on as a landmark event in American history, a case that raised more questions than it answered and left a nation divided. As we reach the conclusion of this intense and thought-provoking journey through one of the most famous trials in modern history, we want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe O.J. Simpson was truly innocent? Or was there something more to the story that was never uncovered? The case has left many with lingering questions, and we'd love to hear your opinions. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the O.J. Simpson trial, don't forget to like and subscribe to Room 57 for more gripping, in-depth stories that explore the most fascinating legal cases, unsolved mysteries, and historical events. We aim to bring you content that makes you think, reflect, and challenge what you know. Want to be part of the conversation? Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you have, and we'll feature the best responses in our next video. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss out on the latest content from Room 57. We're just getting started, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon with more captivating stories. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the mysteries of the world around us with Room 57. Follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes upgrades and exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video.